getting it. This one going live at some point. Okay. I can't tell if I'm live or not, but okay, we're gonna give it a few minutes while folks get acclimated, come into the room. Yeah, it is. Folks coming in. I see Sister Betty is in the waiting room. Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the R&DP studies. It's the annual takeover. This is your comrade, President Yejide Oromila from the African National Women's Organization. And I'll be heading up today's study. I want to amp myself up. It's late on the East Coast, a little bit later when I get started on doing things on the East Coast. Let me get myself together over here. So I just want to thank y'all for coming in and just remind everybody that, on the third Thursdays of every month, I collaborate with the International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement to do some studies around issues and topics related specifically to African women. And today's study is named African Women, Family, and the Colonial State. And we're going to be talking about this in relation to our Arrest CPS campaign. So you get a little bit of PE around that, some background, but also the political basis for why we even do that campaign in the first place. So if you're watching on the interwebs, on our Facebooks, on Impedim's Facebook, on AMWO's Facebook, and on our YouTube, you can continue to watch there, but if you want to be a part of the discussion that happens live online, you can come into the Zoom. And the Zoom, tell me what that is. I don't have it in front of me. RNDP is, what is it? What's the Zoom link? Matamala, you gonna help me?
tinyurl.com/RNDP studies.
Okay, got it. tinyurl.com/RNDP studies. So if you want to participate, then please come ahead and come into the Zoom as it happens. So so the purpose of doing these studies is to talk through like African internationalism and why that is the theory that we use to explain our world and the relation of African women to what's happening in the world, right? The prevailing thought ideology is for women primarily centers in feminism. And as African National Women's Organization, we say that we're not feminists, we're African internationalists. And the primary distinction between the two is that African internationalism is rooted in the African working class, and it's related to, it's born out of the African liberation struggle. And so as African women, our responsibility in the African National Women's Organization is to organize and recruit African women for revolutionary political life so that we can see our freedom, so that we can experience our freedom, so that we can build for our freedom. And so tonight's discussion is going to be giving some political basis for why we, in the African National Women's Organization, have the campaign Arrest CPS. We're going to talk about family policing as an institution of the colonial state. We're going to talk about the violence that are committed against African women and families and how this impacts African people as a whole. And we're going to hopefully change some minds around the question of safety for African children, and then what we have to do to actually really build real safety for our community. So I'm going to go ahead and slide share. just so that we can make a few announcements at the beginning, and then we can go into the political education. My comrade Coco is helping to. Coco, can you just admit people to? My comrade Coco is going to be admitting people, and she is going to also be putting some links in the chat. I did offer some links in the registration. Like if you registered through AMWO and you did press the register button, you got some links for some readings. Those are reference points. We won't read those tonight. We're actually going to be reading tactics and strategies and RNDP, and we're going to relate it to the topic of child kidnapping, because I really want to give y'all some political grounding around the issue. And then we can talk about, family policing as we understand it and how people internalize it, right? Because what I want to say too is that since we've been organizing around this issue, it is kind of like the thin line. It is the thin line that revolutionaries have to cross, because if you're a revolutionary or if you are activist and an organizer, somebody who cares about Black people, and then we're telling you that you cannot unite with the state around the issue of state-sponsored kidnapping, because we have been internalized. Many of us have been internalized this idea that we want to keep our children safe, and the institution that's going to keep our children safe is the state institution, because we don't have anything else in place, and we're so concerned about African children. And so when we talk about this issue and we say this is the state, you can't unite with it at all whatsoever, we usually get some pushback. There's usually some hesitancy. There's usually somebody asking a question about whether or not this is a valid position that we should be taking. And I'm offering that to you tonight and giving you why. So let me go ahead and screen share just to give y'all some background. Let's see. So tonight's study again is the African women, family, and the colonial state. And this study is going to expose the attack on African motherhood through the lens of family policing and the colonial counterinsurgency. As many of you know, I'm the president of the African National Women's Organization, and ANWO is an anti-imperialist, anti-colonial revolutionary African internationalist organization for African women who organize around the pressing local and national and international issues that add to the special oppression of African women and femmes. And it doesn't say here, but it's also a membership organization. So if you're an African woman who's watching this and you like what we have to say, we encourage you to join. You go to our website, amwouhuru.org. Tonight, we are asking that you contribute to the fundraising efforts to raise $100 this evening. You can do that by going to our website, amwouhuru.org/donate. And if that doesn't work for you for whatever reason, you can also just zell us some resources. info@amwouhuru.org, and it go right to our bank account. These resources that we're raising tonight are going toward the appeal process for our comrades who are still fighting the bogus charges, the bogus indictment the bogus decision that came down from the courts in the Hands Off Uhuru case, charging them being conspiring to be Russian agents. So they have filed an appeal process. We still have to pay the lawyers though some money. So we're, as ANWO, raising these resources to contribute toward that. So if you are able to, please donate toward our efforts tonight throughout this broadcast. You can do it again by going to the website amwouhuru.org/donate, or to our Zelle, info@amwouhuru.org. We got merch. I got to update some other stuff in there. There's actually some ideas that has been brewing, but you can go to our website, amwouhuru.org/storefront, to get your merch. Wear your politics on your shirt. Like, I think even now more than ever, I think it's important for us to be politically noticed. I think that's important for us to be as strong as we can in the places and spaces that we navigate. So there are lots of things in our store. We have socks, we have tableware, houseware, we have t-shirts, we got bags and caps and hats and things like that, sweaters. And so go in the stores today, go to annualhoover.org/storefront and grab your merch to represent Annual. The money that comes through that process, the profit that we get through that is used to support the work of the African National Women's Organization. And if you buy it during this program, this will be also contributed toward the fundraising efforts for tonight. And if you want to use our skin and hair care products, go to Colonize. This is our body care brand that I have mixed for the last, I don't know how long I've been doing the Colonize, but it's only getting better. We got like a small cult following of people who kind of tell me on the low how they love everything. I mean, I just had a conversation with some comrades and they was like, I only use this on my face. Let me tell you, all this rave reviews, I need to get some of this feedback back so I can use it to promote the brand. But go ahead and go to Colonize.com and get your the Colonize products. We have body butters, oils, shampoos, lotions, mists, facial scrubs. All these things are made with love, handmade, and don't use harmful chemicals. It's indigenously rooted, meaning that we source ingredients that our people use, our ancestors use, our peers use, that are made from the earth and that are proven through time and tests to be beneficial to our skin and our hair. So go to thecolonies.com and get you something. So as we get into today's program, let's first talk about this analysis, right? Like, the system of family policing in the United States is rooted in the legacy of human trafficking, and it began with the attack on Africa. African internationalism, the theory of African internationalism that was developed and created by the African People's Socialist Party chairperson, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, which basically says that the foundation of parasitic capitalism was the attack on Africa. This was the attack on Africa, the enslavement of African people, the taking of our land and our resources, and using our labor to build the foundation of the colonial capitalist system as we know it today. And without having done that, this system as we know it would not exist. It requires the attack, the oppression, the violence, the murder, the kidnap, the trafficking, all of the things that it was founded on. It still requires it to maintain itself. So this brutal history laid the foundation for the dehumanization of African motherhood and African people, and treating African women not as caregivers and protectors of their children, but as vessels of labor and production for the colonial state. And today, institutions like Child Protective Services, as it is called, but we have named it in the movement that we've built, family policing, they operate in the same manner, removing children from African families. And so if we understand the historical continuity about, that it's not just that it stopped at slavery, but that colonialism, because it was not destroyed, continues in different iterations, in different forms. It looks different. We may not be chattel slaves anymore, but the institutions and the mindset and the whole foundation that was used to rape and murder and kill and build on this country at the expense of indigenous people, at the expense of African people, still exists. So whatever is created on that, systems of law and order, systems of child care, systems of education, all of these things are colonial institutions and only serve to accommodate the needs of the colonizer. So that's why we say that the CPS system is an extension is a modern day auctioning block, right? This is where African children are kidnapped. This is where African mothers and fathers are unmothered and unfathered. This is where children become commodities of the state, where their bodies are worth resources, money that the state uses to do whatever it wants. This is where other people who take on these children get money. So this is a money industry in relation to our children. It's not just the welfare of children, but particularly because if you want to keep a household together, right? If you really care about the institution of family, and the care of the children, what you would want to do is make sure that the family is good. So if there's a contradiction in the family, where the resources, whether it's monetary or otherwise, that are being used to complete this family. And if there is no hope of the family reconciling, then what is being done to reconcile the immediate family, then what is being done to ensure that these children are still with their biologicals? And and we're going to talk more about like what we've experienced in this work and why it is that we don't have any sympathy for anybody who says that they're working with the state, um, why whether they're a foster parent or a social worker who said that they want to have help children, when we've talked to social workers and foster care parents who also say that the system is broken, but I'm just here trying to mitigate some of the harm. Meanwhile, you're not aligning with the campaign called Arrest CPS, or you're not inside of the movement against family policing. You can't mitigate the harm while still representing the institution that's causing the harm without doing something other than that. So I first want to take us to the RNDP, and Comrade Coco would have put that, if you haven't already, Comrade, could you put that in there? The RNDP for me is the basis, the African internationalist basis of what we're doing around the question of women. The African People's Socialist Party created the African National Women's Organization in 2015 to address the special oppression that African women are facing under colonialism. And the goal is to bring African women into revolutionary political life so that we can forge ahead to create the future that we want, right? Like we African women are nearly, if not half of the entire African population. So if we're not creating programs, campaigns, challenging things that are related to African women inside of this colonial construct, then what are we doing? Are we preparing ourselves to actually govern? And are we preparing African women for leadership in the African worker state that we are fighting toward? So we want a unified Africa under the leadership of the African working class, and we want it to be a socialist, united Africa. And how then are African women going to participate in this struggle to get us to that point, right? And some of the things that we have to look at is the nuances in which the state attacks our people. And the RNDP in points 59 through 62, let me take this off the screen for a second. 59 through 62 talks about that. I'm going to read that. It says 59 says, we commit ourselves to the relentless struggle for the rights and dignity of African women and the end of social and political oppression. We adamantly oppose sexual and economic exploitation of African women by any sources, including our own colonized community. We demand the recognition of African women as equal partners and leaders in the struggle for the emancipation and unification of our, sorry, I looked at the letting people in, sorry, comrades. We demand an immediate end to the particular abuse of African, I skipped, let me go back. We adamantly oppose sexual and economic exploitation of African women by any sources, including our own colonized community. We demand the recognition of African women as equal partners and leaders in the struggle for the emancipation and unification of Africa and African people worldwide. We demand an immediate end to the particular abuse of African women and African women in the colonial system. And we recognize that this abuse has always included rape and subjugation by the white slave master and an attempt by white power to separate African women from African men. We believe in the absolute unequivocal, I'm summarizing, we believe in the absolute unequivocal political, social, and economic equality of African women and men. And we demand an end to the special oppression of African women and the elevation of women to their rightful place as equal partners and leaders in the forward motion of development of the African liberation as leaders, makers, and shapers of human history. That's our core That's our subtitle for our organization. Point 60 says, we call for the establishment of the International African Women's Commission under the democratic revolutionary process and government that would advance the struggle for the complete and total emancipation of women. When AMWO was first created, we had an African Women's Commission. That was actually the party formation before it was the mass organization. So we have an African Women's Commission. And the African Women's Commission's responsibility is basically everything that AMWO is doing right now to recruit African women into revolutionary political life. So some of the things that the RNDP says that we could do on our trek to make to deal with liberate Africa and African people. For African women, the commission could take on things like free access to technical and industrial skills for African women to gain abilities to engage in labor, independent small state. Federal is calling for these things: independent small state, federal, and other forms of public assistance and or welfare with access to all resources which sustain economic development projects in the African community, free medical facilities and nutritional meals for all pregnant mothers and their children, free continuous education and professional training to young mothers, free loans for women who wish to build cooperative farming or any other productive activity, particularly in rural areas, and national commission to assess and monitor all local and national forms of violence against African women with the power to take to courts all perpetrators. G, massive re-education of all society on the role, rights, and necessity to elevate the status of African women, and implementation of a child care as leaders and producers in society. And we demand that all forms, 61 says, we demand that all forms of adoption of African children by whites around the world be categorized as kidnapping and considered genocide under international law. And point number 62, we demand an end to the theft, kidnapping, sale, abuse, and removal of African children from their communities under the genocidal foster care system throughout the world. I wanted to read this because this is African internationalism. The demands that the RNDP is putting forward is demands of the African Revolution. And it is something that we have to win. I want to say this with my chest, that the issues of African women are not the issues of African women solely. It is the issues of African people. So even though many of the issues that we organize around have to deal with women and children, like everybody can get in on this. Everybody can be participating in this. It's not just when somebody gets shot by the police that you can be involved. And there are so many different nuances as to the ways in which African women are attacked. And particularly if you're an African woman with children, there's so many different nuances, so many different little spears that can pierce you in this system. And the family welfare system is just one of many. So let me go over to the purpose of this meeting, right? It is to talk about CPS as the modern day slave auctioneers. There was an article that was included in the confirmation, and it's also in the June 2025 Burning Spear. There's an article that I wrote about our May mobilization in Washington, D.C., the Black Mothers March on the White House that was organized as AMWO was a part of this configuration, which is a movement that is being built of people who are against family policing. And we're going to go into more about how that's a part of the tactics and strategies that were laid out in that the course of action that we have to take in order to build a mass movement and mobilization around these issues. So let's go to tactics and strategies real quick. I think I can screen share that. So the African National Women's Organization have been involved in the work to, let me stop sharing, have been involved in the work to free African children from the clutches of the state. More than that, too, we have been involved in the process of um, creating humans out of African mothers who are experiencing contradictions, right? Because one of the first things that we experienced when we first got into this in 2017 was um, Africans be the first ones to tell you, look at how she got a nose ring in her nose. What kind of mother is she? I mean, it was the most horrific type of generalizations around somebody's parenting based on how they look and how they talk and things like that. And we recognize that that's a class affiliation, right? Like, and there are also working class people who make determinations about somebody based on how they look, how they dress, whether they like you, whether they're not. And so the fight has been uphill to change the narrative around this. First, when we were first in the work, there was nobody around. Like there was really no other organization that we could find that was in this space that was organizing and building power around parents and mothers, right? And there was this huge, and there still is this huge stigma around mothers who children are being taken. Well, she must have did something. She must have did something to them kids. And we start looking at the statistics. Let's look at the statistics, for instance, right? In every state in the United States, African children are disproportionately overrepresented in the system. If you are five African children in one state, in the entire state, chances are that two of you will be in the system. It doesn't matter. And what does this say? This says that African parents do not know how to parent overwhelmingly. It says more about like African parenting not knowing how to parent. Now, when we look at the foundation of this system, we know that African parents African mothers in particular, has taken care of children who were not their own, raised taking care of households that were not theirs, breastfed children who were not their own, while they left their children at home with aunties, grandmas, and all other kinds of female relatives to take care of while went ahead and took care of other people's children because white people needed that. They could not take care of their own children, and they benefited from the fact that African people needed resources and employment. And this was what they were comfortable having African people come into, particularly African women. So African women have been taking care of of children that are not African for a very long time, right? So it's only because white people needed that. When we come into when we come into and we move forward in history, right? And that's like out of slavery, that's in slavery, out of slavery. And we come into the transformation of society, Black Power movement, and Black women in particular were becoming rank and file members of Black liberation movements throughout the world, and particularly the United States. Here we start to see the emergence of an institution of child safety, right? They are militarily in the communities, pushing back any revolutionary Black power struggles that are happening, but they're also doing a number of other things, right? So they're doing some economic oppression, and then they're also creating these institutions that's going to go in and save Black children or children that are being neglected or abused. And what neighborhoods are they targeting? They're targeting the poor, working class, African communities that are pushing back against the state. So as we see coming out of the 60s and 70s, these institutions that may not have been federal at the time, which is like an idea that was coming into formation, have now become institutionalized in the Child Protective Services, Department of Human Services sort of conglomeration. And that was created as an attack, a counterinsurgency attack against the African community. Now you start to see more and more African children who are being taken into the custody of the state. You now get to criminalize African mothers. And what does this do to the community? This breaks up the entire African community. I'm not saying like parents and mothers, the entire African community, because you might have a contradiction. African women may have a contradiction, right? You may be on drugs because who put drugs in our community? The Colonial State. They prove it. They flooded the community with crack cocaine in the 1980s, right? They imposed poverty on our communities. They imposed the military police state in our communities. And these are the things that African women and families have to navigate through. And so African mothers and fathers have to make decisions about who's going to go to work and who's going to stay home with the kids, or how much food's going to be in the fridge and things like that the state has criminalized. So they targeted these communities that they know are under-resourced or have no resources. And they say, you're not taking care of your children. Now we're going to go ahead and take the children out of your home, and we're going to treat them in a better life. And what that is tantamount to is kidnapping. I don't know if you've ever experienced, and some of you, I think I see a few people who might have experienced this firsthand, but in our work at the Arrest CPS, we've had mothers tell us, I've had to go into hiding to have my child because they have already kidnapped two, and I am pregnant, and I do not want them to kidnap my third child because it's an automatic. They taking that one. We've had mothers tell us that I was just coming home, opening my door, and somebody meets me on my front porch. And she says, somebody has said something about you being, or made some sort of accusation or claim about her parenting. And with the baby in hand, the state person, the Black woman usually, is going to take this baby and say, listen, this is the paper. We're going to take this baby, and you're going to be able to explain that you did not do this one, two thing or the other. And what do you do in that instance? First thing you're stunned. Second thing is like, you can't take my baby. And third thing, you just don't know what to do, right? And you don't know what your rights are in that instance, right? And so there's a number of things that we have done over the years. We've done know your rights trainings. We've been advocating with parents in the courts. We've had people call us an emergency saying that somebody called on me. I still have my children. What do I do? Giving them advice on what they needed to do. So we've been in it, and we've heard so many different scenarios that are heartbreaking. But one of the major things that we've come to understand is that it's the state, right? It's the state. And another heartbreaking thing is that these Black mothers, are usually in confrontation with other Black women who work for the state. They are usually talking about, and it was a Black woman who did this to me. It's a Black woman who's treating me nasty. It's a Black woman who's doing all these things and making it so hard when she should be on my side. And there are so many instances where people say, well, if I'm a social worker, why can't I join the Arrest CPS? You can. You can join the campaign, but you have to unite with it. And by uniting with it, ultimately what that means is that you might have to quit your job, or ultimately that means that you might have to be on the low, helping us smuggle kids out, because fundamentally you cannot work for the state, operate for the state, follow the rules of the state, do all the things that the state says, and then say you want to rescue children. You just can't do it. These are two things that can't exist at the same time. And so what we have been doing with the Arrest CPS work is figuring out different ways to build the capacity of our organization, number one, and number two, figure out the ways to educate the community around our responsibility. Don't inform on your neighbor, right? We've also been trying to build dueling contending power projects like that. Who Kijiji Child Care Collective, that says that we have to take responsibility for our children. We have to come up with solutions, because if we're saying that the state is wrong in all these other instances, they must be wrong in the instance of them taking our children. So you can't be like, oh, but the kids, we've been doing outreach on the streets, right? In the streets, for a number of years, we've been tabling, and we speak to the African working class who say, well, we got to take care of the kids, right? But they also say, but CPS ain't ish. We know that they don't help. Nobody ever says, and nobody ever, the the response when somebody's like, well, I'm gonna call CPS on you because we want to take care of it, that's never welcomed. I watch these television shows, and anytime somebody mentions CPS in a television show, it's always a bad thing. It's never a good thing. Generally speaking, the overall sentiment around CPS is that it's not a good institution. It doesn't mean anything good, and it does not mean anything good. And also, when we look at the statistics of how many of why children enter into the system according to the state, primarily it's because of neglect, meaning that they're criminalizing poverty. People don't have what they need, and they don't have what they need because African people are also being, all the other things that are being imposed on us in this system. So for us, like it's a roundabout thing, right? It's a roundabout thing. So generally speaking, when we do the Arrest CPS work, we try to politically educate people, but we also want to build a movement so that we can challenge the system, challenge the state, and create these dual and contending power programs. So that's when we come to like the work that we do with the Black Mothers March, and we do work with the other organizations that are also coordinating the Black Mothers March. And it ties back to the tactic. The real name of this document is not Tactics and Strategies. It's called The Political Aspects of Building a Mass Movement, the Tactical and Strategic Objectives for Black Liberation by Chairman Omali Yeshitela. And it was written in 1977. So it's an old document, but colonialism has us working in perpetual circle. So what I would like, and I would ask for some volunteers to help me read because I've been talking way too much, is for us to read two sections. Win the people to independence, and there's another section that I have outlined. I think it might be maybe built through coalition. And I wanted to read these sections because before I go into the Black Mothers March and what this is doing, and then what ANWO was doing too beyond just the march itself. And then I want to go into some questions around what people understand around of what are your own ideas or impressions of CPS, and how do you navigate this question, which is a very deep and profound question, and it sometimes deal with like some mixed objectives, mixed feelings about it. But I wanted to read this because we have to build a movement, right? The state is not going to take us seriously if only one or two, three of people care about this issue. We all have to be in it. And so anyway, this is a part of the strategy to get us there, and that is to first get people to understand that we need to have revolution. So Don, if you can help read, if you can start here. Thank you, comrade.
Win the people to independence. Our first and most important objective should be to win Black people to the position of political independence. If the masses of Black people are not won over to the position of independence, there will be no independence for Black people. It is as simple and clear as that. If we can agree that the masses of our people must be won to the position of independence as a prerequisite for liberation, we can already see that we automatically begin to give political definition to our work of building a mass movement. It is obviously in our best interest to identify those forces within the dispersed African colony which are most sympathetic to the independence movement, and after so identifying them, we must win them, or a sizable sector of them, over to the idea of building a mass movement which meets our common strategical objective of winning our people to the position of independence. When we talk here of the need to win our people to the position of independence, it must not be assumed that our people are anti-independence or hostile to the notion of independence. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our problem here is that the independence movement has done too little in the area of systematizing and spreading a philosophy of independence, which would give us the kind of philosophical influence with our people presently wielded by the anti-independence philosophy of integrationism. And even in those areas where we do not put forward some philosophical charity, we have too often failed or have been unwilling to provide consistent practical leadership for the day-to-day struggles of our people, which would give real meaning to the value of our philosophy in the real world. Therefore, it seems clear to me that when we talk about realizing the strategic objectives of winning our people to the position of independence, we should be prepared to do so through mass propaganda and agitational work, while in the heat of mass felt and identified struggle. When we talk about building a mass movement, then we are talking about doing so with the predetermined idea of realizing the strategic objective of winning our people to the position of independence while giving concrete philosophical leadership to the self-felt and identified struggles of the people. And as we are discussing a mass movement which must be built, and the organized pro-independence forces are so few, we're talking about uniting with the greatest people of this sector of pro-independence movement for the purpose of building a mass movement designed to promote the common strategic objective of political independence through self-liberation. To the degree that our work is tied to realizing our tactical and strategical objectives for liberation, we are putting our politics in common and reducing the ability of personalities to play the determining role. We don't walk out of meetings because our feelings are hurt, because our feelings hurt. For that would be rank subjectivity. We don't attack and shoot up fraternal organizations because of FBI-led maneuvers. For that would be eliminating our objectively scientifically defined comrades. Our actions would be necessarily determined by a minimum of principle. For our main, primary, and most fundamental political objective is to serve the people through realizing to the best of our ability the tactical and strategical objectives for liberation. A second and related strategic objective for winning liberation is to establish the leadership of the pro-independence movement. In building our mass movement, then, we see that it must be designed to clearly demonstrate the leadership of our movement. We are helped further in determining the political aspects of building our movement by taking upon ourselves the responsibility of realizing this strategic objective. Again, we see the objective of uniting the pro-independence forces as a political necessity, and we have articulated the basis for minimum unity. Because this need to unite is recognized as a strategic objective when we are about the business of building our mass movement, we are automatically armed with the political patience to continue struggling for principled unity, even the most backward forces within the pro-independence movement. In parentheses, backward forces here are not the same as reactionary, comprador, traitor forces, which might also call for independence, but which, by virtue of their slavish relationship to imperialism, would sink the people deeper into colonial bondage. Uhuru.
Oh, thank you, comrade. All of that to say that we have to win the position of independence, right? Because even in the Arrest CPS work, which is very subjective and very personal to someone's own struggle, we still in that, like, we got to get free though. Like, yeah, it's okay. Like, if we are able to free your child, if we ever to organize with you to push back against the state, there's somebody else's child that is being taken right now. And so what do we have to do? If we don't destroy the colonial system, if we don't overturn that, if we don't kick it down, remove its pedestal, then we're going to continue to deal with this effed up institution of family policing all of the time. Just like with all the other institutions, we even might get people to reform it, make it less harmful. But the thing is that we don't control it. We don't have any say. It impacts us greatly because our children are being kidnapped, our families are being decimated. And so if we recognize that the system upon which the family policing institution was created is the same system that enslaved us, the same system that created Jim Crow, the same system that created sharecropping. All this stuff was legal. The same system that lynched our foreparents, the same system that had us in the house working for white people. This is the same system all the way down the line. And this is just another thing in this system that is used to control and police our community. And more so, it hits at the center of the African family through the question of children and parents. And once you demonize or once you criminalize or you put this idea of instability or harm associated with African women, which in African culture, African women are seen as strong holders of the culture, holders of the community. And once you attack it in this way and say, well, she's horrible, she whipped this child, or she did this or did that, that was irreprehensible. And we're taking that, right? We're taking that feedback from a state institution that whips us, that rapes us, that takes from us, that oppresses us, that keeps us locked in the system of bondage. And they're telling us that we are doing this to our children, and they are what is the word? They are the experience. What's the people who have experience? They have the most experience with these systems of harm, right? Like they know how to harm, they know how to identify it because they're the harmers. But it's also like they are not using this to protect African people. Why? Why would this system protect African people from ourselves? Why would they care about what we do to our children when they never cared about our children in the first place unless it benefited them? And the key to that is recognizing where the money flows. I wish I had prepared or sat down a little bit longer to look at the money trail, but I've talked to a comrade to kind of like lay out what the money figures looks like. But there is a financial benefit for each state. There's a financial benefit for the government. There's a financial incentive for the kidnapping and targeting of these children. And the longer that African children stay in the custody of the state, the more money the federal government sends to the states for the housing of these children. And of course, they can use a pittance. They can use a quarter of that to house a child somewhere, but the rest of that can go to some other kind of part of their budget. So it is a cash business that we're talking about here. I see Sister Betty's hand.
Yeah, I just want to salute your philosophy. I want to salute the struggle and especially the march that really helped put the issue of colonialism and slavery on the front pages of most communities that I know of. We started this campaign when I became an assistant principal in 1984 in Brooklyn. One of the things we had in terms, we didn't use the phrase dual and contending powers. I'm sorry, we didn't. Was Medgar Evers College had a program that was funded called the Center for Law and Social Justice. And as an assistant principal, as you know, I'm mandated to do the colonial thing, that if a teacher brings an issue of a child being perhaps neglected or a parent being abusive, I had to, file the complaint. But what I could also do, because Medgar Evers College's Law and Social Justice Center had counselors, I could say to the system, we don't need a welfare investigation. We have a counselor on board that's going to interdict between the parent and the family and the child. And we saved a lot of parents from the child being removed from the household, as a result of that. But one of the things that center did do, we investigated just what you said, Sister. Yes, you did. In New York City at that time and for a couple of decades, to incarcerate a child in one of these social welfare systems to protect it from its African mother cost $220,000 per year per child. You factor in the cost of the psychologist, the cost of the transportation issues, all of the different parasites that were sucking, supposedly serving this child. On the other hand, we documented that if you interdicted a community-based, community-controlled intermediate school, an elementary school, it cost only $15,000 per child. Otherwise, do something about the school system, give the school system, local school system to the community with community-based programs and community-based curriculum, and you save the child and you save the family. So you're right, it is a colonial enterprise. It is strictly a cash cow with the added ingredient that the Black bourgeoisie gets to feel, superior to the African working class. And in this tragedy, the Black bourgeoisie is clearly the issue. You cannot deal with this without a class analysis. You simply cannot. And it cuts across all cultures. You have, some people born here as Africans making judgments. You have colonials coming from all over the world, happy to feel superior to the local African. So it was a tragic situation. But if you don't control the institutions, if you don't have that analysis of the economic slavery and the fact that the capitalist system cannot exist without being bed bugs on us. They're really bed bugs. They're bloodsuckers. So sorry if I took so long. I wish we'd had Anwo back then, because we did try to organize mothers. You can't believe, yes, you would. I had to interdict for a mother that was a vegetarian. And her neighbors accused her of starving her children because she didn't give them meat. I'm sorry for laughing. But thank you for giving me this time. And again, I salute you for the march and, for the way this institution is a counter institution against colonialism. Wish we'd had you back then.
You didn't have us back then, but you had you back then. And you had other African parents, and you had the community. So, this was...
Yeah, as assistant principal, one of the things I found is that we had a large Haitian community, and like the large Southern community, we believe in hands-on. We get tired of talking. We snatch you in a minute. And so then the children learned they could report to their teachers that their parents hit them. And then the parents would be afraid to hit them because they'd be deported back to the... And so all I would do is call up, my comrade in the Center for Law and Social Justice. He would contact the social worker at the Department of Welfare. But quite often I'd tell a parent, come in and have a conference with your child. And I'd leave the office and I'd leave a ruler there, and my office was soundproof. I said, tighten them up. Because sometimes that's what they need. They need to be tightened up. They said, I'm in America now. I'm free. I don't have to listen to you.
I think what you raised are a couple things in your response, Sister Betty. You raised the class analysis, which we have to have, right? Because it's the African petty bourgeoisie who will sit there and make it the problem of the African poor and working class. Like, this is something that just lives there, right? And when you go to some of these churches, and we try to get the church involved in some of this stuff, right? And not only the churches, the mosques, let's get it, let's all the religious institutions, when you try to get them involved, they don't want you. And I think that a lot of the class analysis, the aspiring to be the African petty bourgeoisie, is really rooted in these institutions that are supposedly there to help the community, and they have the resources and the backing and the people that can lend to a movement to push back against the state. So that's another thing. And I think the other point that you raised was the willingness to intervene in these issues, right? Recognizing that not every family is perfect. There may be some family that has a problem, but it was the community who sat down like, listen, Tanisha, we understand that this is something that's happening. What you need, girl, because if we ain't gonna allow, Johnny to be, coming to school, and you ain't gonna be doing this, and what we got to do as a community to get you the help that you need, and make sure that you're safe and that you're not overwhelmed, because we're not gonna allow you to do this to the children, right? Like this is the community response, because and if the parent cannot parent, because we found this to be the case in some cases, who's the next best person in line in that family that we get to vet and look at and see who can take on the responsibility. And sometimes it's hard because we're talking about the African poor working class who already got their own bills, got their own challenges, in every individual dealing with their own thing. And another mouth to feed is another burden, right? And that's why sometimes, not all the time, sometimes it's easier for people to allow for a child to be taken out of the family because they just can't afford it. And we think also about like international adoptions, right? When we have entire countries that are like the barrios in our community, like, you know what I mean? Ain't got no resources. The parents don't have ability to pay for this and pay for that, don't have no food and things like that. And and then people come in and take children. We were talking to a sister a few months ago, and who is an international adoptee, and what they do is they say, we're going to I want my daughter to have a good life, and these people from overseas are going to come and take it and provide these things for my daughter because I cannot. What would be the obvious thing? This parent obviously wants to parent, right? This parent obviously wants to parent. And instead of saying, "Oh, let me help you parent," you say, "Let me take your child." And whatever you got to do with yourself is whatever you got to do. But I'm gonna take your child and I'm gonna give your child the best life possible. What is the appropriate response as a person? Right? It's like, listen, do you need some seeds so you grow some food in your backyard to make sure that you have food for your children? Do you need somebody to pay your light bill, or do you need a job? Do you need access to health care? These things that become the responsibility of people who actually care about children and want to build a community, because our children are our future. And when you remove children from you remove opportunities for the children. There's not, the foster care to prison pipeline is real. The foster care to sex work pipeline is real. The foster care to foster care pipeline is real, because a lot of the children who experience being taken also then go on to be impacted by the system as well. We've met the mothers who were in foster care who are now dealing with their children being in foster care, and the broken relationships that they have with their community. They don't have community. They don't have any support system, and that's not by incidence. There's another segment of this tactics and strategy I want to read, and it's talking about colonialism in the real world. And it's on page, if y'all have the link, it's on page 15. I'm going to go ahead and screen share. MQ, you did have your hand up to read, and I wanted to see if you are able to take this on, starting with this section here. But this is the last section that we're reading, colonialism in the real world.
Colonialism in the real world. In the real world, this is called colonialism. It results in real human suffering for the colonial subject, and because it is a basis for the social, political, and economic development of the colonizing nation, it results in arguments, ideas, and theories which explain the colonizing nation's relationship to the rest of the world in a distorted and fanciful manner, designed to justify the relative position of the colonizer to the colonized in the real world. Generally speaking, the attitudes and ideas held by U.S. North Americans relative to African people could not be otherwise, given the colonial relationship with the North American people. How else can we explain the attitudes held by the intellectual giant Frederick Engels concerning the Irish people colonized by England, where Engels' family owned textile factories? In his book, The Condition of the Working Class in England, published in 1845, Engels states of the Irish, "With the Irish, feeling and passion predominate. Reason must bow before them. Their sensuous, excitable nature prevents reflection and quiet, persevering activity from reaching development. Such a nation is utterly unfit for manufacture as now conducted." Such an unscientific statement from a man who made such gigantic contributions to the development of materialism is almost unbelievable. In one single statement, he has reduced the ability of an entire people to the condition of the feelings and passions, separating the feelings and passions of a people from the material conditions of their lives, and turning everything upside down by making their material conditions be dependent upon the passions and feelings rather than the other way around. My point here is that the attitude and ideas held by the U.S. North American people, although constantly influenced by governmental policy and manipulated by ruling class opinion makers, have their basis in the historically evolved need of a society to explain its involvement on stolen land based on slave labor. The premise that ours is a struggle against racism and imperialism is incorrect. Ours is a struggle against imperialism, which employs colonialism as its form of oppressive exploitation. We can struggle against imperialism by struggling against colonialism, which is a real condition in the real world, and its contradictions which often surface and which can be exploited politically.
On the other hand,
On the other hand, when we struggle against racism, we're struggling against ideas which are, or we are struggling against ideas which are in the heads of a vast majority of European people. There's no identifiable source of political power to overcome, and the enemy must necessarily be viewed as a politically homogeneous and monolithic group of people who are racially identifiable and who have no political differences we can exploit, and who, because they are identified racially, represent a permanent condition which can never be overcome short of their extermination. This is not to say that the anti-African ideas in the heads of the North Americans cannot harm us, but the ways in which they harm us are such that they've served to maintain our colonial relationship with the U.S. North American state. Therefore, it ought to be clear that what we generally refer to as racism is simply individual North Americans carrying out the U.S. policy of colonialism.
okay, thank you, comrade. Appreciate that. Uhuru. So here we have a segment that talks about. I wrote a piece called I can't remember the title. It's a long title. It's like colonialism in the 21st century. What does it look like for Black women? Essentially, that's what it was. And so when we look at the ways in which colonialism impacts Black women, um, it's not always visible. There's a lot of fights that are being waged with Black women. Some of them are in the employment, some of them, but a lot of them, particularly women who have children, which are the most oppressed of us all, like when it comes to their interaction and connection to the state, um, are if in this one instance of child policing, family policing, you're dealing with the police, you're dealing with the courts, you're dealing with social workers, you're dealing with judges and lawyers. You're also dealing with um, other institutions of policing that are weaponized by the state, like mental health professionals, other people who then have a say-so on whether or not you can have your child back. So, for example, if a mother is angry, oh, you have anger management issues, you need to go to anger management class. And you go to the anger management class, and the woman says, or the person who's she still has anger management issues. So this is going to delay in you getting your child back. And you're angry because they got your child and they don't want to give you your child back because you never did anything in the first place. And then it's like a whole thing. And then they want you to bow down. Take it in the butt. You know, they want you to like really bow down and just take every single thing that they have to ram up inside of you. They want to rape you with this system. They want to they want to dehumanize you. They want to break you down and make you just this slave and have you begging, you know, and they do everything to make you feel dehumanized. This is why it's so important for us. So this tactical and strategy work is about building, you know, the position for independence, recognizing that colonialism is the primary contradiction in the work to get us free. We have to overturn that, and then everything else can right itself. Colonialism is the basis, and then the Black Mothers March is building a movement. So when we organize around this, it's sometimes difficult, like I said before, but it's really important that people understand the gravity of this issue. We're not just talking, we're talking every state in the United States. Black children are overrepresented. We're talking about a colony in which Native people still experience kidnapping, right? They had the Native schools that went into whitewashing Native peoples. And they have African children. They kidnap African people and brought us to a whole new continent, right? And they continue. They're right now taking people out of elementary schools, children out of elementary schools, separating families at the borders. We're talking about this ongoing theme of kidnapping and moving African people. So people like when they say like with trafficking, human trafficking is like $1 million. We don't know how to get rid of it because colonialism won't allow you to get rid of human trafficking. You have to destroy colonialism in order to end this human trafficking process, right? Because as long as you have this institution that's built on the kidnapping and sale, it's the foundation of it all. It's the foundation of it all. So I want to open it up. I have some prompts, but I wanted to see if before I give the prompts, what other people are thinking about this issue. And, I want y'all to be honest about your thoughts about the if you ever thought about child policing or family policing. And if you have, like, what has been your thoughts about it? Whether you thought it was good or you didn't have any thoughts about it, or you just, whatever. I would like to know, like, your thoughts, comments, feedbacks on the PE so far, or whether or not you had any points around this issue. Uhuru. Don?
Uhuru, comrade. So first off, just my unity with this powerful collaboration between Anwo and Impedum. But my question was the one in the chat. I said how I'm studying education, social work, and law to offer initiatives such as the one started by Anwo, some professional support. That is my goal, possibly, to make homeschooling a viable alternative in the African community. What are the ways specifically, like, how would you advise African students specifically to help raise the struggles that Anwo is championing, or advance the struggles, rather?
They would have to be involved in the struggle. You can't do this outside of it. And I would say too, if you are impacted, then there's more motivation for you to be involved. And what that means is that there are a number of organizations. If you go to blackmothersmarch.com, you'll see a list of organizations that work in the space. So AMWO is just one of them, and we want you to join AMWO, of course, to help build the Arrest CPS work, because it's the only one rooted in African liberation. So they're wrong. But there's plenty of other organizations too that talk about colonialism, and you'll get some PE and some resources and things like that. But fundamentally, we have to be tied to liberation of our people. Because if we're just working in this space, if we're just saying hell no, CPS, arrest CPS, that's not enough. Like, we have to build power. We have to, Anwo was about to build like an underground world for these children now. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it came down to it, they're creating fictionalized TV shows that talk about children being taken and women being made into handmaids and things like that. When the reality is that it's happening right now. And my thing to students would be, and to anybody for that matter, is that if this is something that you can see is an anti-colonial struggle that has to be waged, then you must join the movement. You must join organization, and you have to be involved in the process in creating systems of dual and contending power, solving the problems around of the contradiction. And you have to be involved with the people who are impacted and who are involved in solving the problem. So I would just say that.
The urgent request, Sister Yesterday. I'm sorry to interrupt. National Jericho just sent me an email. It seems that they've been without power in the correctional facility, Miami Correctional Facility. They have been without power since 4 a.m. No AC, no fans, no running water. 2 men in a cell, concrete. cell. No water is the critical piece here. And they're
Mm.
asking for people to make phone calls. I'd like to put it in the chat. And when this webinar is over, I'm just asking all comrades to please be in solidarity. This message came from Brother Shep of the
Yeah.
Black Panthers in New York, and it came from Kwame Shakur's wife about these conditions. And I know those of you who are from Florida, you know this is not new for Florida to do something like this. So I'm
Mhm.
going to try and put the number in the chat, and I appreciate it if all the comrades on this call, Zoom, when we get off, if you would make these calls. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you for letting me make the announcement.
Absolutely. Thank you, comrade. Okay. Chukwu Dumaga, your hand is raised.
Thank you. Yeah, I would just like to first, I would just say, it's been very eye-opening for me. I also just want to, all this is very new to me. Growing up, when you talked about having negative feelings about CPS, like that, I completely agree with. Like, there's always kind of a negative sentiment, if you saw it in a movie or something like that, you saw that person that got pissed off, I think for me, like, my main question is, how would you answer if I was to go and try to go talk to, like, for my wife, for example, if I was to go talk to my wife and tell her that, CPS is child policing and kidnapping and stuff like that. And, she, as well as I for years, have been hit with the propaganda that, oh, that's not what it is. It's supposed to be helping, kids who are being abused or whatever. And, and I know it sounds dumb now, but my wife is white for preference, and this is stuff that we're changing kind of political ideology kind of together, but it's hard. And so, that's something I can see my wife saying, well, what if, they're trying to, help kids get out of abusive situations, and, what about the people taking responsibility for having them in poor conditions, and how would I kind of combat that very common trope that CPS is thrown under?
I think fundamentally, we look at the numbers. Thank you for that question. We look at the numbers. I mean, at the very least, we can look at the amount of African children and children overall who are in the system. African children disproportionately, but there are white children or whatever who's in the system as well, indigenous people, children who are also in the system, Latino people who are also in the system. And yeah, Coco recommended a book that somebody can read, is the Torn Apart book by Dorothy. I can't remember her last name, but
I'm
it's
looking
there.
it up. I'm gonna put it in the chat.
Okay. But it comes with that. But I would say that the statistics show that in almost every state, or if you look at almost every state, and you can even Google it, you'll see that the overrepresentation of Black children in the state. This is not a coincidence. When we look at all the other statistics that we're faced with, number one. Number two, we have to then ask ourselves, is this the same state that kills Black people, incarcerates Black people, closes down public schools, and which impacts Black communities, do all these other kinds of things that harm African people, that we now, that in every other instance that they're wrong, and then in this instance that they're right? The other statistic is that Black children, that would mean that Black parents don't know how to take care of our children. Black parents are the worst. That's what that's saying about you, about me. That Black parents are the worst, right? And that we are the biggest harmers of our children. Not the colonial state that will shoot our babies down. We've seen them do it. Not any other piece of the colonizers' entity, but we are. And we have to push back against that. That's not the truth. Children are not being saved in child protective services. There's statistics that say that there's more harm. Children are more likely to be raped, disappeared, and trafficked in family policing institutions. More likely is out there. They are better in the home. Even if the home has contradictions, they are better and safer in the home in most instances than they are in a stranger's home, right? And these are things that can be easily understood and easily searched for and easily found. And I think also, if we are looking for ways to solve the problem, if somebody who says that they're doing it has no responsibility on their own, like I have a responsibility. I don't know exactly what I could do in every instance, and that's also a huge burden, right? That's also could be a huge burden because I don't know if I can take on somebody else's trauma. But that's why we build organization. That's why we build dual and contending power institutions. Sister Betty talked about an instance where the community figured out how to mitigate the harm of the state, right? Not necessarily working for the state, but mitigate how any influence that the state has on our communities and our families. And so we are able to just look up all the things that we can do. But I would just say, to answer your question directly, Chukwu, I would just say, just look at the institution, just look at the statistics and Google it. There's the one instance or a few instances that the media likes to portray and put out in front of us is that one instance where a mother just loses her wits, so is a horrible person and kills her baby, kills her children. I've seen them. Horrible stuff. And this wipes everything else clean. It's so horrible that it makes people's mind go back to believing that this institution is a good institution, when in reality, all of the harms that they don't report inside the institution, they don't tell you all of the things that happens to children. And more than that, what they do to the family. They don't want to give children to the grandmothers or aunties or uncles or sisters or whatever. They don't do that. They prefer for the child to go to the hands of a stranger. So they don't work toward getting children back or getting the family rehabilitated. So I would just say some of the statistics that you could look up and verify and talk about too, to really understand like how the family policing, child protective services really does not protect our children. Coco?
Horo, I really appreciate this study. I was excited for the study, as you know, and I love the information that you provided, and it actually invigorated me and is making me think more about what I can do. What I can do is as far as abolishing the family policing system as it is right now, because my family has been entrenched with it. I have a foster brother. My mom ended up becoming a foster parent because my best friend from high school, when his mom died, instead of allowing him to put him with his dad, they wouldn't allow him to go to his dad or come to us. They put him in juvenile detention center. He didn't do anything wrong. Didn't do anything wrong at all, besides his mom passed away. And since he was 16, going on 17, they put him into a juvenile detention center. And I'm grateful to have the mom that I have, because she saw him in that jail suit and did everything she could to get him. And so I truly believe that my mom saved his life. But that is, my mom always been big on community. I mean, we ended up having to do the similar thing years later when my little cousin was lost in the system. And even though I had custody of him when he was 3 years old, it wasn't through the state. So once he went into the state, it was harder to get custody back of him. And we didn't get custody back from him. We tried to get him to 7. He was 16 when we was finally able to get him. And he had been pretty much so lost with the abuse, the education, all of that. It was hard to him to accept love. because of all the abuse and mistreatment that has went on in his life. So it is very important that, you know, if we have that underground railroad of trafficking kids for, you know, liberation, my house is a spot, you know, because I really believe that we have to have community control, especially in times like this. We're seeing the ICE raids. ICE raids is just the tip of the iceberg of what that we're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg of what they did to the Haitians a few years ago, but what they do every day to African people. We just had one of the public housing projects exploded over here a couple of days ago, and my first instinct was like, where they gonna put those people? Where they gonna put those kids? You know, because you know what they're gonna do. They're gonna say that the mom doesn't have stable housing and go put the kids into foster care. So we definitely have to, it's such an important thing because our kids are our future. So, and it's important that we raise revolutionaries, raise, you know, aware kids so that we can have a better future for ourselves and everyone else.
Uhuru, comrade, you raised an important issue about because sometimes the children age out and they come home and the family cannot reconcile. There's so
Yeah.
much shame, there's so much blame, there's so much, you never came for me, when the mothers have come for their children. And there's so much negativism that is being told to these children in these spaces. Oh, your mama a crackhead, or your mama, she care about this more than you, or she out here having a good life, or there's all these narratives that are telling children that their parents did not care. We have a sister who was in our, you know, part of the Arrest CPS leading committee, and she would tell you that this is what they told her because she was a foster child, that your parents don't, your people don't care nothing about you. And when you are taken from your parents, you lose your entire lineage. Your grandmama now, great grandma, you don't know who you are. In some instances, when you're adopted out, most instances, they change your name. They change your name like you are a puppy. Okay. You lose all birthright connection to your family. The mother does not have access to you. You have no access to your family. This is not a helpful system at all. And it beats you down. I mean, it was one instance where, I see your hand down, I'm going to come to you. But there was one instance where we're at a Black is Back convention, and a mom, she comes down from New York or something, and she's like 50 years old. Um, she lost her daughter when she was younger. And she's like, I don't know where my baby is. You know, her daughter's probably like 30 something years old now. I don't know where my child is. I have no access to my child. I don't. And she was crying. I mean, despite there might be some contradictions, and I'm going to say it right now, to be honest and truthful, so many people have drug addiction, some people have mental health issues, but this is all colonialism, like in my view. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, these are things that are a result of colonialism. The reason why somebody's hooked on drugs is because the United States government flooded drugs in our community, period. The reason why a Black woman would have mental health issues is because we live under colonialism. That's all I got to say. Like, we live in a gaslit system that would tell you that you crazy for feeling the way that you are, and it makes you feel like you are out of your whole entire body. You know what I mean? So like everything that you're confronted with, they tell you, oh no, we're helping when everything you know. So it makes you conflict, and it creates these instances of mental health and unclarity. And when you're then thrown into a system of crisis, they've taken your child, they've criminalized you, don't have stable housing, you might be in the system in some kind of way, and then you also dealing with mental health. This does not make you better. It makes you worse. It makes you worse. So, you know, we're dealing with this cycle of stuff. And that's why it's so important for us to be the voices and provide the narrative for our community and organize support. And we may not be able to give direct support, but that's why it's important to build movement, right? It's important to expose the system, to do as much as we can to do political education, because the more people that we can get to come on over to the side of family policing is horrible. Like it can't. There's no there's no redeeming quality around it. The more people that we can help build, and as I said before, this to me is the crux of overturning imperialism, of overturning colonialism in the United States. Like this is it. We're talking about the foundation of colonialism is the kidnapping and exploitation of people, land, and labor. This is it. It's still happening, and this institutions is like the key, the core of it. Don, and then Mecca, and then Betty.
Who, comrade? I wanted to add to that point. You and Auntie Coco was talking about the Underground Railroad. I wanted to that point, like it's to me, it's always been amazing, right? I have to call it this, but it's extrajudicial solutions that the African community has always come up with. For example, when this bastardized English language was put on us, they had to come up with a whole nother classification of the way that we navigated it, so on and so forth. But that point about how you and Auntie Coco shared various examples or excerpts of stories of like intra-familial childcare, right? Where it's like uh uh aunties take care of, or grandmas take care of. This is why and I would commend anybody, if you have elders in their 70s and 80s, record your conversations with them. Okay, Auntie Coco and them talked about how we have to be the voice for our community. One of those things, like I think that all of our elders should be writing books. My grandmother, who was born in the 40s, should definitely be writing a book. These stories, right, of this extra familial childcare is we don't see it too often, and we're not giving enough voice to it, because we would come to understand that we have already had these solutions among ourselves as a community in the first place. Uhuru.
That might be a project. Thank you, comrade. Mecca.
Uhuru, hey, yeah, I just wanted to appreciate this study. I think that it's so important. I personally went through uh, the family policing system when my son was little, and it's one of the worst hurts imaginable when your kid is taken away. I think a lot of times people don't recognize that it's colonialism. Also, a lot of times our kids are taken away in retaliation. Like for me, my son was taken away because of an organization I was a part of was being uh, repressed. And so that was one of the tactics when they raided our spot. But then also we got to get our people to understand that, we really have to stop weaponizing DCFS against each other, because that's another thing too, where you'll see, families, being persecuted. I got a lot going on as always, but you'll see families, being targeted, and it could be a beef they're getting into it with somebody else, and people don't look at it, as tantamount to snitching, so yeah, like it's really important that we focus on it. But then outside of just that, too, as a tactic for organizing, because I think about what's going to bring women in. And this is one thing that's closest to our heart. It's our children, that need to protect, that mother bear instinct. And so I think that when we talk about bringing women in political life and revolutionizing women, it's going to be campaigns like the Arrest CPS campaign, because that's what actually drew me to ANWO, is when I heard you, President Yesterday, and another sister, Amanda Wallace, on Black Power Media talking about the work. And I'm like, okay, I want to be down with that. So just super important. There was another point I had, but I lost it with everything that's going on here. But yeah, just to appreciate the study and just, how important it is that we focus on these specific things. Oh, and like when my favorite came back to me, favorite African proverb, they said when you go into a village, the first thing that's asked is, how are the children? And that should be our major concern too. So when we have a colonial system that's ripping away our kids, then we can't rest. And like you said, this should be our primary fight.
Thank you so much, Comrade Mecca. Sister Betty.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for the conversation. Number one, it's the reparations issue, because under the death camps of slavery, when children got to be about 5, they rented them out as for sexual perversion. And so no country that has this history can tell me anything about how to raise children who are Africans. And that's a reparations issue. We should keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And the second thing is, what makes Uhuru House so dangerous is you have all the community-based programs that you could set up as dual contending power within any public school. You go and look at the city grant requests for proposals, RFPs, and anything that you're doing in your Uhuru House, you can write it up as part of the RFP and go into the school and do workshops with the staff on, how do we say hello? I used to do that when I became a principal in one of the most violent communities, they said, in the Bronx, New York. Also in the public schools, there's requests for proposals for after-school programs. I think, your Uhuru House should be all in that. And last but not least, on the issue of our children being used as commodities, I cannot emphasize enough that on the city council level, we should run a candidate to control the city council when it comes to the Department of Education and the Department of Social Services, if your city council has such. And then you can allocate grants and funding towards your institutions to get paid for what you're already doing. But more important, it's your presence within these public schools. And when I was a principal, I was able to work with community-based organizations that did this, that had a curriculum that was accountable to the community. Last but not least, on the issue of the state, whenever you have a politicized community, the staff within your building are not all your teachers. Many of them are colonizers, and they try to set your family up. And that's why you need a dual and contending counseling agency, community-based organization, but a counseling agency. In Brooklyn, we've got a wonderful group. They call themselves the Black Social Workers, but they're really quite radical. And we use them to come in and do workshops. And so if a teacher makes any kind of complaint, we say, well, the parent is working with the Black Social Workers Organization. You can step out now. We got this. So thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you so much. I see you, KL. Just give me 1 second. So you mentioned a couple of things that I wanted to address. But the last part first, the Black social worker. So part of the work of Arrest CPS is building the committee. We need more people on it, right? Because there's so many different elements that we have to tackle. But one of them is how do we, the point to you, that you raised earlier, Don, around students. If you're a student who's thinking that they're going to become a social worker because they're going to help the community, we want you to do that, but we also need you to get some political education and training. And you have to determine whether or not you're going to work for the state or whether you're going to work for the community. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't go into CPS. Like, if you're a social worker, this is what you got to do. We also need to have more lawyers who are movement lawyers who are in this space. It's hard as hell to get family court, civil. They don't want to touch these cases. So we definitely need to organize more lawyers who are able to advocate for parents, because what they'll do is they give you a public defender. The public defender is always inept. They don't fight for you. They have a huge caseload. They don't have, people end up defending themselves pro se, and that's never good, ever.
That's the role of the Center for Law and Social Justice,
right?
But then make it ever serve for us. They weren't lawyers, but they knew more about law when it came to family law than a lot of these so-called lawyers. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And for example, we can offer scholarships to like the what's it called, the paralegal courses at the local community colleges if we can't get them big universities. So sorry, I'm
Yes. That was one thing. And then I appreciate the interventions, Comrade, I do. And then I also want to say that we're talking about community and how children are being taken into the the family is the state. But we also have to recognize the institutions of oppression and repression are your schools, right? There's schools, teachers are mandated reporters, hospitals, mandated reporters,
Yes, yes,
after school programs, mandated reporters. So if a child comes in with I only eat vegan hot dogs or whatever, vegan and whatever, and I only eat this, I cannot eat this, whether it's your food choices, whether they think your child is underweight, whether they see a scar, all of these institutions, everything that you send your child is mandated to report on whatever that they're seeing. And somebody who's a mandatory reporter asked me, what do I do when I don't want to report? And I'm like, there are different levels to this. How can you then coordinate with the parent? How can you talk to the parent if you have a concern? How do you help mitigate the harm? Or if there is no harm, how do you understand more about this? And I also would say that having a relationship with the parents is really important. So I just wanted to say that these are all the ways in which somebody can be wrapped up in family policing. KL, go ahead, comrade.
I just want to thank you today for this powerful education. As a pediatrician, like you said, I am a mandated reporter, so I find it very difficult to navigate the system because I want to help patients and families, but I have an obligation to obviously file a report if there is a concern for neglect or sexual abuse or abandonment. And I always feel conflicted because I don't want to end up in a situation where I put a child, or I'm responsible for a child entering a foster care system that's not going to help them. I really feel like it's important to try to keep families together if it's safe. And I, just through these teachings, and some of the education I received through New York State for our mandated reporter course has helped me to understand that a lot of families are criminalized for being, what's the best way to say it, unhoused, or they're criminalized for being low income. Black families are overrepresented, which I saw in my mandated reporter education, which I thought was very shocking that they would actually mention this. So clearly someone's working with them. It's not a perfect system, right? But that was very promising for me, but I still always feel stuck. So just to know that I'm a part of an organization that has resources is helpful. So if you're able to send anything to me, because, I work in New York State, so I'm always in that situation where I find that most of the time, 9 times out of 10, people need resources. Even if a child, let's say, is being sexually abused, I personally feel that putting them into a foster care system is not necessarily going to be the best answer, right? Like putting them with a family member who's not going to harm them, who can raise them and love them, would be a better situation. Someone who's going to educate them, care about them, not just collect a check and, put them in a room with 10 other kids who they may or may not care about. So I feel like it's very important, especially for Black children, because like you said, you have people who are in foster care, they grow up, they have kids, and if you come from an unstable environment, then it's just like a generational curve. It just keeps repeating itself. And then as a medical doctor, you just kind of feel stuck. So you're like, how do I address all of this in 10 to 15 minutes, right? So I think it's very important. I think I forgot the comrade's name. He had mentioned about scholarships for professionals. I think scholarships for paralegals, definitely part of the solution. Scholarship for people who want to become lawyers or go into the medical profession. But I think most importantly, like you said before, it's education. Because you can't just hand out money to people who might become part of the petty bourgeoisie, because many of us are in a position where we need money. We need to get paid. So if the colonial system is going to offer you $1 million and someone else offers you less, you're going to go for what pays more because you just got built. Right? I think if we build institutions that are completely independent and we educate people who are going into these professions, whether they're teachers, lawyers, doctors, paralegals, even if you're a parent, I think that's important because you need to know your rights. You need to know what is available in the community, especially like you said, some people have drug addictions or mental health and they cannot raise their kids. Or they cannot parent, right? But separating them from their whole family, whether that's aunts or uncles or a trusted neighbor, that's not the solution. So we do need to have communities involved, even if it's not a direct, like, or biological parents. I think that's very important, because if we don't protect the next generation, it leads to a fracture of the entire family. And like you said, it just leads from foster care to prison, or foster care to a psych ward, foster care to homelessness. And then we keep getting further and further into this system where colonialism is oppressing us, and we're just constantly experiencing oppression. We're not advancing. So I just want to thank you for the education, because I think education is definitely the foundation that thing is built upon, so that we can, build up economic initiatives that can support these particular programs that can help the community. Because like you said, we should be getting paid for what we do, right? Because we've got to fund ourselves. And I think it's important first for
I can't help it. I have to
us to
interject here.
be knowledgeable.
Uhuru is already doing that. That's the point I've been trying to make all night. The African People's Socialist Party.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I
Right,
think we should just reinforce and replicate what they have done, because it works.
Yeah.
Right. No, I agree with that. So that's what I was just trying to say, that making sure people are aware of these opportunities and that they're educated first, right? Because when you go through the traditional system, you are educated to become a worker for the colonial state, right? That no matter what you do, right? Even the way I was educated, is what you are trained to do. So you do have to be educated so you know your rights and you understand where you are in the world and how you got there, so that you can change this. So again, I know this was long, but thank you so much. This was eye-opening for me. Because again, you don't learn this in school. Nobody wants to teach you how to be independent, self-reliant, how to fix your community. So thank you again for this education, Uhuru.
Thank
We
you.
all have to choose a side. We have to choose the side
Yes.
of the people.
Yes, I agree. And as a mandated reporter, I think that them including that in the coursework is important, but not if it still remains the same. The statistics are still the same. Like there's not no sweeping sort of shift in the way that we are dealing with this. Because to be quite honest, our communities are still one of the ones that are primarily impacted by economics, policing, and all these other kinds of oppressive tactics that the state uses, and therefore will be seeing the disproportionality of the things that impact ourselves and our children. I also want to just reiterate that we're talking largely about women and our relationship to these children, but these children also come from men. They also come from uncles and grandpops and brothers and things like that. So, while this is something that we are relating to African women because of the dynamics of motherhood and childhood and stuff like that, that this is as an African nation problem, right? Whatever happens to these families, is a responsibility for all of us to stand up and deliver, and to struggle and fight for our families and our people, because that's a struggle for the African nation. It's a struggle for our liberation. And I also want to say too about the question of resources. What we've begun to do, especially in the places where we have people who can represent the Arrest CPS work, is we look for community-based organizations that can offer resources. We don't offer resources, right? Because we don't have the capacity to do that. We don't have the funding to do that. But there are other organizations in the community that we have identified that we can trust, that we can potentially send people to, like Sister Betty mentioned, the Black social workers and the Center for Law and Social Justice. And there are other things. There's this organization here called Movement. It's called Mother's Outreach Network in DC. And there are situations like that can offer something. And and there are mothers who have to go to mental health professionals. The state deems them to go there, and they usually are sent to state paid mental health professionals that know know the stuff, know how to get people to know they follow along what the state says. So having networks of Black social workers or people who are very familiar with this space that can actually take this on and do their own analysis of what the parents are experiencing is super important. So I know we're running down on time. KL, did you have something else to say? Your hand is still up. Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I forgot to lower my hand.
Okay, no problem. All right. So I just want to go through. I'm going to just give some announcements, and then we can go into some final thoughts about this topic and what we are doing as a way to do the work for Arrest CPS and how you can participate in that. And so I'm just going to go back to my slides. Here we go. So. I had some questions, but we didn't have to go through all of that because I think we talked about this in the discussion that we just had. I do want to make aware that we are going to, again, the third Thursdays of every month, Anwol's taking over to talk about issues related to African women. In July, our next study will be why we organize as African women, and we'll go over African internationalism and why that is our theory. I mean, it was created out of African internationalism, so of course, but we're going to talk more about how this differs in relation to maybe radical feminism, radical Black feminism, or other kinds of things that talk about women's issues. August, sexual violence and colonial power, rape. Actually, I think I changed it. I think we're going to be doing, I got to change it, but I think we're doing NGOism, where Director Aisha Fields is going to come in with us from the All African People's Development and Empowerment Project and talk about the way that the state and NGOs use African women and children as a pawn to make millions of dollars on our tragedy, our crises. So we're going to talk about that, and also how imperialism uses that to be the basis, impetus for war or entering into conflicts in different places around the world. And then September, I'm sorry, I said it for September, but it might be in September. I might have done it backwards. Okay, August is going to be sexual violence and colonial power, rape is a tool, colonial domination. September is going to be the NGOism. Final announcement. So I just came back from St. Louis, and the community has won a few victories. I think the last time we were on here, there were contexts around the community not having power, that they're putting red notes on doors and things like that. Because of the community's pushback, the city is actually giving an award amount to people who have been impacted by the tornado. It's not much. There's a lot more money in the budget that can go toward the community, but the fight is still on. But this is what was done, one, through the community pushback against the state. So power is turned back on. Red notes are being removed from doors, things like that. And the community, through their own efforts, are cleaning up the areas around them. So our next Harriet's Daughters Book Club is going to be on July 13th. It's going to be My Country, My Africa, an autobiography of the Black Passionera by Andre Bluyun. And if you don't know, I didn't know this lady before I read this book. It was given to me by an impediment comrade in New York, Rafiq, to read. And it was a tough read, y'all. For so many reasons, and if you want to know why, you need to go ahead and read the book and read the PDF that it's going to be up on our platform. Comrade Coco is going to put it up, and once you register, you'll have a PDF of the book. You don't have to go and purchase it, and you'll be able to read it. It was a tough read for so many reasons related to class and color and like privilege and things like that in the Congo. It was very interesting. Anyway, July 13th, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern. Today is also where the culmination of Stolen Children's Month. That was the month that was created by our comrade Ashley, who is an impacted mother and wanted to use the June as a month to talk about the stolen children throughout history. Some of them who have been killed are murdered in the course of being kidnapped from their parents, and some of them who are still within the system and parents are struggling to get them out. It also is in relation to ICE raids that are being made. So all of the children that are being impacted by being kidnapped or taken away from their parents. Today was a culmination of that. There are vigils that are being held throughout the country to, uphold the question of kidnapping of children. This is a part of our movement building work. And in San Diego, our comrades are having one this evening. So I think it started around now, actually, since West Coast time. So Soul and Children's Month. Okay. And AMWO in 5 cities will be putting up, we have them in hand, LA, San Diego, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, and Brooklyn, New York. We have our posters. This is a part of our political education piece. These posters are going to go up around the city, and they're twofold. You can read them, statistics around the bold statement that's there, and you might be like, yeah, that's right. Like, CPS ain't ish. And then you can scan the QR code, and if you're motivated to, you can be a part of our local Arrest CPS work that's being organized on the ground. So this is a part of our movement building on the ground as well, right? We got to build power in our communities so that we're not isolated when stuff hits the fan. I'm trying not to curse y'all because I don't know where this is gonna land. So when things hit the fan, so this is the work that we're going to be initiating. We have started initiating. Posters are distributed. We have to get the last set of posters out to LA and Brooklyn, and then all cities should have the items that they need.
Will we have it in time for the International African Arts Festival?
Which is next weekend? No.
Okay, all right.
No. And the One Africa, One Nation Farmers Market, which is held in St. Louis. Our next market is going to be on July 26th. It won't be at O'Fallon Park. We've moved it out of O'Fallon because of the destruction of the tornado. It's actually going to be across the street from the Uhuru House. We had our first one on June 21st. That's why I was in St. Louis. And the community really appreciated the fact that we were there. And we want to organize and make this as big as one of the biggest flea markets or farmers market that happen in St. Louis, but it's in the white section. And we need to be able to build this up in the African community. So anybody who's interested or in this area can sign up to be a vendor, come out to the market. If you know people in St. Louis, tell them about it. And let's keep it going, comrades. And then if you are an African woman and you are not a member of the African National Women's Organization, why not, y'all? We offer these political education sessions, but we also have opportunities for you to be involved in the work. You don't have to be an African woman. You don't have to be a member to be a part of Arrest CPS, but it's worth it to understand the political parts of it and be organizing on a more consistent basis with your branch, right? To solve some of these issues or to raise some of these contradictions and organize our people. So we want you to be a member of the organization. Join AMWO today. You go to amwouhuru.org/join. The lowest, there's different membership levels based on your ability to pay. The lowest one is $25 for the year. That's for students and unemployed folks. And what does the dues contribute toward? Like, we don't get paid. I don't get paid for this position. It just goes back to producing the posters, goes back to the community work that we are able to initiate. So you're helping to build institutions through the dues that you pay to this organization. All right, and I'm going to say thank you, and I'm going to open it up to any last thoughts to anybody who have them in the chat or online. Uhuru comments. Anybody?
Uhuru Prez, I just wanted to know, is there an update on Uhuru Kijiji? What's the status? And how can we support most immediately, Uhuru?
So we don't have, because of capacity, we don't have a Uhuru Kijiji functioning right now. That was the contradiction. We need more people who can consistently work on this project. And the Kijiji, for those of you who do not know, we say that if CPS is horrible, what's the alternative? And Kijiji was our answer to it. We organize with the community. We try to mediate and work with families, and we try to get in front of it before it starts. And we also want to organize childcare collectives, right? community collectives that looks after our children and helps solve the problem, get to know your neighbors, things like that. We just didn't have the capacity. As a volunteer-run organization, we just didn't have it. So it's up and open, right? Like we still part of our work, and wherever we're able to put it down, we will do it.
We're gonna have a vacation Uhuru Chalet yet.
MQ.
Where's the what's the status on the annual Liberation Center?
So the Liberation Center is intact. We don't have any physical destruction yet. We still have to get inside. There was some contradictions about getting inside to see if the roof is still intact. Outside, the roof looks like we don't have no debris or anything on the ground. But we still need to get inside to make sure that there's no leaking happening. We are going in the next 6 months of this last year, we're going to be pushing forward to close out phase 2, which is to raise $30,000. So far, we've raised $6,000 from some earlier fundraising efforts. And phase 2 would get us to the next, if there's nothing that we have to fix because of the tornado, phase 2 should get us to building out the walls and doing some of the internal work like plumbing, electric, water, things like that. Any other thoughts or questions before we close out? All right, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to me yammer on. I gotta get some water. But it's been a pleasure, and it's my pleasure to talk about this because we know that in AMWO, sometimes we just in it and we don't get an opportunity to talk about the actual campaign. And I really wanted to take this opportunity to talk through what Arrest CPS has been, some of the stories of the parents that we've interacted with, both mothers and fathers, and be able to explain to y'all like what is needed. Like there's so much that's needed. I think the critical question here, and for us when we do the Arrest CPS work, is not just the fact that these parents are impacted, it's that colonialism is the culprit. Right? Colonialism is the culprit. And no matter how many children or how many programs or how many things that we do to mitigate harm, if we do not have a movement to destroy colonialism, if we are not working toward the total liberation of Africa and African people, we are going to continue to be faced with this issue and others. Colonialism is the culprit. We have to tear it down. We have to tear it asunder, fire it, burn it down, fly lighters in the air. You know what I mean? Like it has to be on torched out. It has to be destroyed. And I'm saying that, believing that it can be done. It can be done. We're seeing people and movements around the world who are fighting back, standing up, taking charge and saying, we ain't scared of you, U.S. imperialism. We ain't scared of you, French imperialism. We ain't scared of you out here in these streets, son. We got, and so more and more of that is happening. And we can wrench it back, y'all. We can wrench it back. We can turn the world right side up. We can solve all of our problems, but as long as we allow colonialism to maintain itself, maintain and fix and shift itself, then that's going to be difficult. So we have to, help mitigate the harm as much as we can. But essentially what we need to do is through all of the harm is to say that we have to get free. We have to destroy colonialism. We have to build all of our work, even the work that's about services and stuff, around in the anti-colonial struggle and African liberation struggle. Otherwise, it's just reform. So with that, I want to thank my comrades for your patience and for all of your input, and I appreciate this conversation so much. And if you want to holler and get back with us and want to know more about the AMWO Arrest CPS work, you can always email us at info@amwouhuru.org. Some of y'all got my phone number, so you know how to get at me, and then you can email me all that kind of stuff, and we can tell you how to get plugged in. Uhuru comrades, thank you so much, and have a wonderful night. Uhuru. Pista.
Guard up.
Fight back.
Let's
True.
make those calls for the prisoners, comrades.
Yes, the calls to the
Oh,
prisoners.
yeah.
Yes, comrade. Yes,
Please.
yes, yes.
Thank you.
Let me not close it out. Make sure everybody got that information before we leave.
That's up there.
I'm scrolling back up. I see it. Call Miami Corrections.
Yeah.
Got it. I'm gonna post it back down the bottom.
Oh, okay, perfect.
There it is. All right, comrades. Please
Thank you.
copy paste that and let's make the calls. Uhuru. Everybody got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uhuru, everybody.
Uhuru, comrades. Have a good night. Uhuru.